I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
And get that experience. And I would say, honestly, for me, I probably didn't turn the corner until I was 32. To kind of get back to nature, I think get more centered. Sometimes you work so hard that you don't see the forest from the trees and you burn yourself out. So to do, 50 miles, 80 kilometers, and I literally finished it on one leg. And so for me, if I can figure out how to mentor 1 million people, over the next 10 years, like at the highest level, that's something I'm aiming for. And so if I could give any advice to people younger than me, I'd be like, start today.
What's up, my fellow dreamers, doers, achievers? This is episode number 25 of the Dream Big & Co. podcast. And on this episode, we make our way to talk about leadership, belief in oneself, leveraging the support of others, leveraging discomfort in order to expand one's mental strength. We get into the discomfort capacity talk, which is a really amazing topic, and the 3 M's of mindfulness meditation in morning routines. Colin Nanka, the guest for our episode, brings his experience, knowledge, and insight through it all to the stage on this one. And to get really granular and detailed with Colin's story, because it truly is fascinating just to talk about. As for Colin, he has 2 decades of experience in sales, currently holds the title of Senior Director Enablement of North American Sales and Leadership Development at Salesforce.com. He has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and went through the grueling races such as Racing the Planet in Iceland. He ran the Grand Canyon, the Atacama Crossing, a 13-hour run through the desert in Chile, Adventure in Antarctica, and the Sahara Desert, in which he specifically talks about that Patagonia race. He's literally been around the world, is on the board of the Kilimanjaro Education Foundation, and has an amazing family while doing all of that. And I can record an intro for more than probably 10-15 minutes just talking about his experience, his valuable insight through each thing he has gone through, all the races he has done. But we have a short amount of time here, and I just want to say Colin is a man who is truly pushing his personal bounds and improves himself in full. The epitome of improve yourself, impact lives, and thus flourishing in all other areas of his life. But it wasn't always like that, and you'll learn why. So as we go through it in all of episode number 25 with Colin Nanka, please listen in and try to apply something from this episode into your life. And lastly, the quote for this episode is as follows. Warren Buffett, the investing legend, when asked what he wants to be remembered for, said, "I want to be remembered for being a teacher." I want to be remembered for being a teacher, and the man has over 7 decades of experience in investing, one of the greatest investors of all time, and he said, I want to be remembered as a teacher. Unbelievable stuff. Now let's really get rolling into episode number 25 with Colin Nanka. Yeah, so first thing I want to start off with, because there's a lot that I want to touch on with your, you've taken many laps around the, field of life. So the first thing I would like to touch on in talking about your career as well, because you do a lot of work within this field, is can you talk about leadership and how it's more so leading within first and the ability to have like integrity and leadership within yourself to handle your inner fortitude, and more so than just, leading people externally and helping them out to build them up?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I was talking to, a friend and a mentor of mine this morning, and we were talking about, really purpose-driven work. He was a VP at a big company for a lot of years, making a good salary, working 50 hours a week, not super stressful work. And then a few years ago, he decided, to do something else and go on his own. And as he was saying this morning, he's like, I make a lot less money. I work a lot more hours. But I knew if I didn't make a change in my life at that point in time, the back half of my life, I really wouldn't have been happy. So I had to make the sacrifice in order to do that. And so I think about that a lot. I mean, I've been working for, 22 years. I think, I heard someone once say, like, in your 20s, you just got to work really hard and understand what it's like to be accountable and put effort in. When you're in your 30s, you can start doing work that, you're really passionate about. Your learning quotient really goes up. Your earning potential starts to go up, and then your 40s, you're leading and you're making good money and you're starting to plan for retirement. Now, like that may be of my generation's type focus. Obviously, there's a lot of younger people these days that are making money earlier on and doing the things that they want to do. But there's only a certain amount of years you need kind of behind you in order to figure out and get that experience. And I would say, honestly, for me, I probably didn't turn the corner until I was 32. And where I really felt I had created some capabilities in myself and had really a deep belief in myself that I was able to do things or experience things in life that were really meaningful for me. And like, look, I've been working for sales for 12 years. I had been, a top sales performer for 2 different companies, had made very good money. But at the same time, I can specifically remember periods in time thinking, I'm able to do it in chunks or maybe 1 year, but not the next year. And like, what is it within that I haven't figured out how to be really consistent? And for me, it really took some inner focus of understanding my skill sets, understanding what I wanted out of life and how I wanted to show up in the world before I could start to climb more towards my purpose. So I hope that helps to start give some ideas about how I think about it.
Yeah, no, that definitely frames a really important picture. And for me, I'm thinking about, like, I'm in the nascent stages. A lot of people, like, in my, like, age range are in the nascent stages of doing good things in the world. So I feel like the one thing I get out of that is the mentors are huge. I want to talk about that topic, definitely. Sure. And then the other thing is, like, even with me, I find that I have ambition, but the thing I heard recently is, like, on the flip side of your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So for me, it's like there's there's audaciousness, ambition, but I have, impatience at times, and I need to learn to trust that process. So for you, was it like going through like the 20 to 32 years old, the 12 years to really develop yourself? And, what did you do to sort of leverage yourself out and, trust the process of this is what I have to go through in order to get to where I want to be?
Yeah, a couple of things come up there for me, which I think are worth diving into. And one, you mentioned mentorship. So I've got a kind of a strategy and a model on that. I'll definitely dive deeper into that.
Yes,
for you.
Please.
And then the second is around strength. So I've had a business coach for going on 10 years now. And so I would say it was around a similar time, maybe 33, 34, I'm 44 now, that I took on a business coach and started to look at some of those inner workings. And one of the first things that we did is we did a test on what my strengths are or my natural talents are. And so for me, one of my biggest strengths is focus. I'm able to really hone in laser-like on the task at hand. My biggest strength actually is I'm a lifelong learner, right? So that's why I love taking in podcasts. I love being a part of podcasts because I always learn. I'll share some, probably some interesting things with you today, but I'll learn a lot from you in this process as well. So on strengths, as I've gone through the process, when I started to understand things I was naturally good at, it was like, oh, wow, like this is why I may think this way. When I'm in front of a customer, I can have pinpoint focus and, kind of shut out everything else going on. And so I can be very present. Now, it took me a while to figure out some of the downsides of strengths. Downside of that strength for me is I can get really focused on a task, but it may not be one of my top 5 priorities for the week. Maybe it's something I really like to do, or I'm just like, once I get into something, it's hard for me to wedge myself out of it.
Yeah.
So I would say, earlier in my career, I would be focused on something that maybe is like number 7 on the list that I should be doing that week. And that's not going to lead me to success. And so I had to learn to take my top 3 priorities for the week and really order them and do them first. As a salesperson, prospecting is one of the toughest and most challenging things that people do. A lot of people don't like making cold calls. I got good at them over years. I didn't like doing them, but it was part of the job. And a lot of people just keep pushing it back and back. And it's like your number one thing. Right?
Yeah.
You keep pushing it back and you don't do it. Well, if you can't make cold calls as a sales professional, you're in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to manage my energy and realize I'm at my best. For the first 3 hours, I've probably got, my strongest, inner creativity. And so doing those things first thing in the morning, but setting myself up so that I could actually start first thing in the morning was critical to me. And it took me a lot of years to really figure that out. So that would be one example around the strengths.
Yeah, there's 2 things I want to touch on with that. One, I want to talk about first your take on the strengths and weaknesses, because I do a similar thing. And then also I want to get into, because I know you're big into meditation and mindfulness now, and that intention setting and like preparation to take on the task that you want to do. So it's like very purpose driven. But to talk on the first topic is, like a mentor of mine, we've really honed in on the strengths and weaknesses of ourselves and like really trying to chip away at what we're good at and what we're not. And I'm seeing, like, I did a thing where I reached out to a dozen people closest to me and I got all of their feedback on things I'm really good at and things that'll take me to the next level. And I saw so many commonalities. So now the person that's helping me, he's saying you should actionize those strengths and weaknesses and how you can improve upon them. So do you do with each mentor you have, do you list out like a strengths and weaknesses type thing, or what is your like model and process for that?
Yeah, so let me give you my framework for mentorship, what has worked for me, and then I think we can touch on some of the approaches that I would work on with different mentors. And I have a lot of younger people ask me too, like, well, how do you get a mentor, and how do you show up and make sure you're using their time effectively? So I can touch on that as well. So I like to use the analogy of playing squash. Could be racquetball. For those that are tennis players, could be a tennis player as well. I like to use squash because I was a squash player. And when I got a lesson when I was first learning, what they told me was you need to play a minimum of 3 times a week. Otherwise, you're not going to be putting in enough reps in order to be improving. And you should play once a week with someone who is better than you, because they're going to stretch your abilities. You're going to learn a lot from them. You should play once per week with someone who's less than you, just coming behind you, not as good as you, because then you're going to actually be working on your strokes. You're going to push that person, but you're going to be mastering your craft. And then play once a week with someone who's equal to you, right? Because then they're going to drive your competitiveness, and they're going to push you in order to run around the court as hard as possible. And that can be applied to many sports.
So it's like the pulling of the learning and teaching at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So that's worked really well for me. And so I think earlier in my career, I didn't have as much to give because I was learning. So I had mentorship. And I've changed my view on mentorship over time, of that you find, as a younger person, that you go and find mentors. I find that in my best success, I have been working incredibly hard, and then someone who sees me working hard, or sees me a little bit in what they saw in themselves when they were younger, they just naturally gravitate over and want to help you. And so that's my first recommendation for anyone looking for mentorship. Just check yourself that you are working at 100 to 120% capacity. And so people see you as working hard, because that will gravitate them over to you. And then once they do, right, then you can start to establish that, mentorship relationship. And you've got to earn the right, but you've got to take the time to ask and say, hey, like, I learned a lot from you. if you'd be open to it, I'd love to, stay in contact with you. And, sometimes you working shoulder to shoulder in the same office. Other times you're not. But, if you're open to it, could we connect for 30 to 45 minutes once a month, every 2 months, once a quarter? Hey, whatever's good for you. Like, I'll take that time from you, lead that dance a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that ability to just ask. I feel like a lot of people, they're hesitant. And just if you open that door, they're definitely willing. And like you said, you have to be willing to also put in the work to get there and show them that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, showing up to those meetings prepared, making sure they're using their time effectively, not being late, making sure you end on time, because typically mentors are pretty busy. And to your earlier question of like, how do you approach those conversations? I typically focus on one thing, right? What's one thing that I'm working on that I could use some advice on? I've got a good experience of mentorship because I have a coach. And so we've got this template set up of, what are a couple things that are working well to recognize the work I'm doing, but then where do I need support? So we usually focus on two things in a 45-minute conversation of where I need support. That's formal. That's a business relationship. She's my coach. But in mentor relationships, it's typically one thing. And I have managers, I mentor a lot of managers, and they'll often come to me and say, hey, this is a challenge I'm having, with a person on my team I don't know how to handle a certain skill or a behavior or a situation. Can you help me work through a conversation or an issue? And so we usually, we'll spend 30 minutes focusing on that one thing, and then they go try it out in the wild, and they'll come back a month later and kind of let me know how it went, and we'll spend some more time on it.
Yeah, definitely. That's really powerful, and I feel like it's really practical for people to use, and not to stay on path with this topic, but just to deviate a little bit, and talk about what you actually do as well, because that's definitely important. Can you talk about when you first got into the realm of meditation and mindfulness? And I know there's a point in your life where you felt kind of stuck with your work, and you kind of had to, for those 6 months, go back into nature, find yourself with these ultra races. So maybe through all that accumulation of all those things, you really found your footing, and being purposeful, intentional, and getting back on track with where you wanted to be.
Sure. Yeah, let me think about the right way to frame this. So I worked in hardware sales for 10 years. I've now been in software sales for almost 14. So I spent 10 years at Xerox in Canada, 14 years, almost 14 years at Salesforce. A lot of that time in Canada. Last 5 years, I've been in New York City. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. I moved to Toronto, and then I moved to New York. And so that's the journey that I made. I actually started more in nature when I was younger. I spent a lot of time, outdoors, on farms, out in the bush, helping Dad with stuff that he was doing, within the forestry industry. So I actually started life in nature. But as I moved to Toronto, which, is less in nature, at least in the city, I found I was spending more time in a concrete city. New York, even more so than that. And so,
concrete jungle.
Was a calling back for me to kind of get back to nature. I think get more centered. Sometimes you work so hard that you don't see the forest from the trees and you burn yourself out. So for me, I'd had a couple of very successful years when I was at Salesforce. And then I had a couple years that were really not great as a sales professional. And I just felt like I needed a change and a little jaunt into nature. And so I went to Africa. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with a trekking group. I went on a safari. And what I realized is I was burnt out, right? I also realized I, wasn't doing things for the right reason. And, where I'd been successful in the past, I had a formula in sales that worked. And then 2008, the market downturn, everyone who was in sales had a tough year. And so I needed to change my formula. I needed to pivot. I needed to be able to, reset what my methodology was. So I learned a lot on that trip. But one of the things I did as well is I raised money for a local school in around Kilimanjaro in Arusha. And it was a friend of mine who was the head of the Kilimanjaro Education Foundation who encouraged me to do that. And so that for me was like a trifecta.
That's awesome.
I came out of it and I had a lot of reflection at the time. And I was like, Okay, so I did a tough adventure, a grind. I learned a lot of skill sets in being anxious and being uncomfortable. I then went like really deep into nature on a safari and saw some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life to this day. And then I helped at a local school and was able to take supplies to them and raise money for them and help give them facilities they needed so that a bunch of students could go to school. And so for me, I was like, wow. And that was a learning for me. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, like, okay, I can grind, I can give back to myself, and then I can give back to other people. And I started to just work through that of like, how do I keep doing this, every year or every second year? And that really set me on a path to being more present and learning.
Yeah, and that's the process you were talking about that you found yourself in? Yeah. Okay. And
yeah, I mean, we'll maybe talk about some of the, the other adventure races later on, but I did a similar thing where I did an adventure race where the grind was hard and uncomfortable. I experienced after that race, some beauty in the world I hadn't seen. And then we also raised money for a good cause. And so like that was kind of the trifecta for me. And I started to realize, okay, like maybe this is like my secret sauce. And when I brought that back into work, I was being a positive influence on other people to show them I could do things that were larger than what I thought. I was doing interesting things, and so that helped in sales and opened up a lot of different doors and conversations. And I was serving in the world, which again was positive for me, and I felt really good about the contribution I had in the world. So those three things kind of came together. Yeah,
it's fun. So I'm seeing a commonality where it's like you said with the mentorship, someone above you, someone you can teach below you, someone you can compete with. And then with your process for your yearly ambitions, like a uncomfortable task, something you can really achieve, and then giving back, and then whatever else it is, like finding those things. And I feel like it's a huge duality to have both sides. And the one thing I wanted to ask you is, how important is it with that, having that reflection? Because we're always trying to do more things, and we're present throughout that, but to be able to step back and reflect quarterly or yearly, whatever process people use, like how crucial is that for your goals and everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say I probably learned this early on from some mentors of mine who were entrepreneurs, but also inside Salesforce from our CEO, Mark Benioff, who's a mentor to everyone here. And they have all shared, I've never got my best ideas while I'm in the office. Right? My best ideas are always when I'm outside the office. I'm taking the opportunity to recharge and restore, being somewhere in life or nature that really brings you joy. And so I started to really figure that out. Like my best and most creative ideas come when I'm not in the office. And so I took their line of thinking on that, and that served me well for sure.
Yeah, and then one thing I was really, like a pressing question I really wanted to ask you is, since you do the ultra marathons and like really elite races, like things that are extremely uncomfortable and difficult, do you see a similarity between highly successful people and their ability to do these extreme races that push them way outside their comfort zone? Because I see that in some people, and I'm interested to hear what you think.
It probably took me a couple of races to learn that, because in the first one, I was only focused on myself, and I made the mistake of running by myself for a very long time. The first race I did was through the middle of the Sahara Desert, and it was 5 times beyond probably what I should have taken on for my first race, and so no surprise, I didn't make it, and halfway through I had to pull out. But part of the reason was I didn't have the camaraderie or the community with me that was helping me push forward. And as I reflected on that race, and I had we went with 10 people from Canada, and they were there to support me, but I wasn't partnering with them in the right way in order to push one another to keep positive to get through that race. And when I did the second race in China, probably in two parts, I traveled with a group of 4 people, one from Singapore via Sweden and 2 from the UK. But more specifically in the last day, from that same gentleman from Singapore, and we went 100 miles together. Wow. And at the time, he was the mentor because he was older than me. He'd done these races before. He was also a deep sea diver. So he had dived on some very historic shipwrecks in his time, where he would literally go down for 4 hours, in order to pressurize properly, dive on the shipwreck. And then he'd have to slowly come back up for a number of hours. So his mental capacity was massive.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that, he led in that 100 miles for me, I was the follower, right? He's the one that I say, we're great friends to this day. I said, you pulled me through that race. But he returned the favor, and he said, if not for you, if I didn't have someone with me to follow or to partner with, because I couldn't have done that alone myself, right? So I do always remember that I had a part in both of us getting across that finish line. And so it's important to partner with people.
Yeah. I was gonna. It's funny you say that as well, because I've been thinking about this a tremendous amount lately, and like you talk about, like running extreme races in life are super analogous. And as of recently, it's like I've been thinking a lot about whether it's a business venture, school, relationship, whatever it is. You can do a lot of it on your own, and it always starts from within, but you need that tribe around you or people around you to pull you forward. So have you seen times in your life where there is a large internal belief and you have a high self-esteem, high confidence, but you need the people to lift you up, just like you were saying with your friend with that race?
Yeah, I've got a great example of that in my third race in Iceland in 2013. I'll answer your earlier question first. Once I raised my gaze up to realize all the people that were in these races, instead of inward focus of just trying to finish, but raise my gaze up and really connect with people and talk with some of these people from all over the world. They were entrepreneurs. They were, senior leaders in companies. They were private practitioners and, doctors and, thought leaders. And once you actually sat down and got to know them, they were such fascinating people, but they were always so willing as well. Once you got to know them, they would help push you forward, and you felt like you had this wind behind you of all these people that were through this struggle, that were trying to, overcome something that was challenging. And that was the same thing that when I did my third race in Iceland in 2013, it seems like it was not that long ago. We had an amazing tent of people, some people that I know very well to this day, and some people that I ran with in Patagonia in 2017. But we had a very positive tent. It's really important to have positivity in these races. And I had an injury partway through the race because we were running so much downhill. It was unexpected. And so I developed an injury in my ankle, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to actually run the last day. But there's so much positivity in that tent that the folks were like, hey, just put one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other tomorrow, and just see what happens. You've got nothing to lose, right? And so they literally helped me out of my sleeping bag. One leg was good, the other one wasn't. And they're pushed me out the tent, and one of them walked with me for a good 20, 30 minutes and kind of got me on the way. Because by that time, a lot of people are beat up. And I'm just I'm gonna give this a go. And so there was a lot of walking. I did get some running in there. That hurt, but I was able to get some running in. And I just put one foot in front of the other. And it was a terrible day, treacherous wind and rainstorms. And it just became such a bigger challenge within that day that it was if I can overcome this day, I can overcome anything. And so it took me 19 hours to do, 50 miles, 80 kilometers. And I literally finished it on one leg. And when I got back, they were so happy, one, that I survived, two, that I was able to overcome, and three, that they were part of, the win. It was a team win. And that camaraderie and that support showed me that I could do more than I thought I could do. And in that race, I developed a deep belief in myself that there was no race that I could not finish because of what I had experienced in that race. And every race since, 2012 and 2013, I've gone on to finish. And so that was a big one for me. That's
a really profound story. That's defeating average right there.
Yes.
In and of itself.
That's where it started.
Yeah. And can you talk about, because it's so when you ran that race, it's probably so applicable to going back and teaching people in, Salesforce, leading all these people, like, and what certain things, if you're going to like trickle down to a couple that you took away that you were able to like replicate and teach to others through all these ultra races, specifically this Patagonia one.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I talk about is building capacity, right? If you think of, a circle, right? It can be a tennis ball size, and that's your capacity today, right? You grow your capacity by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and whether that's as a sales professional of making more calls and setting up more meetings and going out and meeting more people than you ever thought possible, or in any other line of work, it's working more hours and pushing through those time periods when you're tired, when you're cranky, when you don't think you have much left to give, but you recenter yourself instead of being in a negative space, but asking yourself, what's the opportunity? Like, what am I learning in this situation? In the middle of one of the races, I was struggling, and I asked myself that question, and the answer, and believe me, I didn't like simply ask that question and the answer came up in a minute. It was over like a 3-hour period of, explicatives. But the answer to me was like, wow, you're not strong enough, right? You are not mentally or physically strong enough in this moment to do this at the level that you want to do. So in this race, like, what can you do now in order to address that? Well, I can get my mind in the right place and be positive. And that, what I've experienced in these races is I push myself to the breaking point and beyond. So that tennis ball, when I come back, right, is then it's a much bigger ball.
It's a watermelon
right?
now, yeah.
maybe it's gone. I wouldn't say it's gone as large to a basketball, but
yeah,
it's got bigger. And then once you stretch to that capacity, right, it doesn't go back. You now have that capacity, and so you next start with a basketball, and when you come back, your capacity is a beach ball, right? So how do you put yourself through challenging situations that you can learn and grow from? When I was training for one of my races, I was working with my yoga instructor. I went to yoga quite a bit, and I started doing some one-to-one work with her, and she put me through challenging situations around breathing and positions that were difficult for me, but I could feel myself growing in that moment. So some people earlier in their career are like, well, I've just started. Like, take something on that's challenging for 21 days and commit to it. You'll grow by the end of that 21-day period. You got to have the willingness to want to try.
Exactly.
Right? So that's one big thing in terms of growing capacity.
No, I absolutely love that, and the way you talked about and framed that story. And talking about, I know the races are another level, and it's for you because you have a large capacity and threshold to deal with discomfort. But for other things I was thinking of, for like smaller things people do, even things I do right now, I have friends doing a 30-day rejection challenge. Taking cold showers is a huge one. I do yoga regularly, even meditation, sitting in silence. Like, people think it's easy, but no, it's one of the hardest things out of all those, like just sitting with your thoughts. Yeah.
I have a friend who's a mentor and a teacher, and he believes he meditates every morning, and he believes in the cold shower. He takes a 5-minute cold shower every morning at 4:30 a.m. He gets up at 4:30 a.m. First thing he does is cold shower, and then he meditates for like 30, 45 minutes to an hour. Like, he's one of the most connected human beings I've ever met in my life, and he's made a lot of money by being very connected and being a very prolific teacher. But you got to be willing to get up at 4:30 and take a cold shower every morning. And meditate if you want to be as connected as he is, right? So he's really willing. To put it out there. For me, I didn't take on meditation seriously until I was probably 40, and it wasn't because I turned 40, but it was a time in my career and adventuring where I felt like I wanted to be more present and more connected. And I tried meditation retreats. I'd gone to day-long retreats and meditation classes, and it had sparked my interest a little bit. But it wasn't until I actually used an app that kind of got me hooked a little bit on the gamification, competitiveness of it. And so I lend a lot of the success of it to using an app where I started at 5 minutes 3 times a week, right? That doesn't take very long, but just to, try and keep your mind still for 5 minutes at a time can be challenging. And for the last 2 years at least, I have gone 20 to 25 minutes every single day. It's the first thing I do, no question. There's no questions about it. When I go to bed at night, it's I'm going to bed at this time, and I'm going to get up this time, and the first thing I'm going to do is turn over, and I'm going to get my meditation device. I'm going to meditate, and my experience with that is that you ride kind of up and down in that meditation, and it's challenging, and you cover some ground that you're going to cover later in the day before it happens.
Yeah.
And so I'm more thoughtful when challenges come around. I'm not as quick to react, and I'm more solution oriented or more curious than getting anxious. And so it's been huge for me. And I think a lot of people you talk to, a lot of higher achievers, usually have some sort of mindfulness or presence practice. And so if I could give any advice to people younger than me, I'd be like, start today, right?
Yeah.
Like, just give it 30 days of whatever cadence you can commit to. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's just giving it a try, and it'll come to you in the right time period when you're ready for it.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly worded, and hit the bullseye right there with everything you said, because I've been thinking a lot about it, and just the way you said it was really on point. So I really appreciate that. But I was gonna ask you one of the questions, to sort of wrap this and make it full circle, is like, do you have a morning routine? Which I know the staple for you is, right away meditation. But is there any other key things you do? Because I feel like I'm trying to develop a strong morning routine, and I find that, I timed it. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I have to be willing to wake up very early to do that. But it's so much more worth it when I am centered and grounded throughout my day. So do you have more things to add to your toolbox?
The two big things are mindfulness, so meditating, and then exercise. Me and my wife, we had a child, 9-10 months ago, and so that kind of throws your routines in a challenge a little bit sometimes. And so making sure that I still got my mindfulness in was critically important. And getting the exercise in, where I typically get 45 minutes to an hour in during the week before Tess came along. If I got 20 minutes in, like, that was a win. And that was, I wasn't burning a lot of calories, but it was just awakening the creativity within, getting a small sweat, and that was a win for me. Now she's sleeping well. We're 10 months in, fingers crossed, at least for a little while. And so I got a great 45-minute run in this morning. And so those two things are critical to me. Something else I've been playing with a little bit is working on kind of, I would guess say, recall ability, memory games, and those sort of things. There's a cool app called Brain IQ, and I've been testing that out. And it's got different things that, focuses on your ability to focus on two different targets at the same time, test your memory, test your, your ability to hear sounds and stuff like that. So I'm testing that out. I probably do it like 3 times a week. I'm definitely getting better at it. And it's gamified, so I find that cool. And then the other thing I'm doing is using an app called Whoop, and it's got a wristband. I actually don't have it on right now. I need to put it back on shortly. WHOOP. And it measures the strain that you put your body through in working out. It measures your sleep, and then it measures your recovery. And the way it does that is by measuring your heart rate, your resting heart rate, your variable heart rate. And so that's something that a lot of athletes are using these days. And the ability for me to, two things that have come out of it is, one, where I think I've been getting enough sleep, I haven't, and the body's a little bit worn down than I thought. So literally focusing on getting an hour more of sleep every night than I've been getting in the past has got me back into the green, at least for the measurement, of my heart rate. And then the second thing is just around, understanding that instead of pushing 5 to 6 days hard every single week, your body actually needs a full day to do nothing. If I do nothing one day, my body is better prepared to really go hard the next day. So I actually have a lot more energy, and I can put a lot more into a workout. And so I've been testing that for like the last 30 days, and it's been pretty telling.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to try those out myself. I like that a lot. Yeah, and then because I want to talk about, I would like to get into the topic of sleep as well, but running sort of low on time, so I want to make the most out of the next question.
Sure.
For another time, but with like the way I like to sort of end this to pack a powerful punch and get real valuable advice to people out there listening is, what is one big dream and goal you have, like grand ambition for yourself, and then what action items are you taking to get there? Because with yourself, like even if you look at your Instagram, for people listening, you have one of the story highlights talks about your 2018 goals. And you had a lot, which congrats, you brought a baby into the world. That was one of them. And then there's a bunch here, just to read off like one or two, is you launched the Patagonia mini documentary, record 5 podcasts, write 200 blogs, which I'm sure you did, and then do 50 plus hours in community and all other stuff with Salesforce. But I think you're very goal oriented and you have grand ambitions. So what is one major one that you want to, accomplish in your lifetime?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a few of the things that I'm working on right now is we created the mini doc. It's a 10-minute mini doc, and a lot of what it talks about in there is the ability, some of the things we talked about today, to dream big, to focus on the journey. Right, it was a 10-year journey for me to get to that race, and then be able to film it. So I'm a creator. I love creating things. I didn't kind of know at the time that we'd be creating a little mini doc about what we've been doing, but it's been super rewarding. And so to get that word out there and to get out in front of other people and share that message, I present a lot internally in the company, but also in the startup community here in New York as well. And so for me, mentorship has been one of the biggest gifts of my life, of getting and giving. And so for me, if I can figure out how to, mentor 1 million people, over the next 10 years, like at the highest level, that's something I'm aiming for. And the ways or the methods that, I'm doing that is through, sharing my story through online presence, through my blog, which goes out 3 times a week, through sharing the story, through going and speaking live in front of people, through doing more adventure races. There's another week-long adventure race I'm likely to sign up for next year in Georgia, Baltic State. I'm excited about that. And I guess the last thing is the Kilimanjaro Education Foundation, which I sit on the board of now. So 10 years ago, I climbed and raised money for them. Now I'm on the board of that organization. And so we have a goal this year of raising, $50,000 in order to rebuild classrooms in around Tanzania.
That's amazing.
And it so happens the founder's 50 this year, so it's 50-50. And that's one of our goals. So it's about impacting the students, but it's about getting other people enrolled out there and showing them that when you commit to serving, you can accomplish amazing things. So sparking that interest in other people, and maybe they don't, support or spend a lot of time on our initiative, but they start their own initiative, right? I got inspired by my friend and founder, Todd. So I want to inspire other people to start something that's important to them and give them the gift of giving back as well. So those would be a few things that I'm focused on. Yeah,
that's it's a really amazing goal you have, and you're definitely showing the signs, and you're doing that 100%. And I'm one of the people who's definitely been impacted by your knowledge, your experience, your valuable insights. So just to talk about that, and then just thank you for being on this podcast, answering the questions, and like I said, offering great insight, because I do truly get a lot out of what you do, and I'm dipping my toes in the water with you helping me out. So I'm sure a lot of people listening were very thankful for what you had to say. So thank you. Times 10.
Thank you for sharing the message, and thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.